Welcome to the DaVinci Hour, a podcast series that interviews individuals across the field of medicine to help provide an inside look into their experiences and provide insight on how to navigate the journey of becoming a physician. My name is Dr. Maxwell Cooper, and I will be your host. This podcast is brought to you by DaVinci Academy, a medical education company that provides online video courses, outline format books, and clinical case videos for students studying the medical basic sciences. You can check out all that DaVinci Academy has to offer at www.dviacademy.com. All right, everybody, welcome back to this week's episode of the DaVinci Hour. This week, I'm joined by Dan Lambert, who is the CEO of an up-and-coming dermatology company called PathologyWatch. I'm excited to hear about the new services and new technology he's offering a growing number of dermatology practices, as he'll tell you about. So, Dan, welcome to the DaVinci Hour. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Maybe if you could give the listeners just a little bit of your background, kind of like your personal background, and then how you got to be the CEO of PathologyWatch, and then kind of what your role is there now as the CEO.
Sure. So I'm a computer engineer by training, and then was at Harvard Business School back in 2011. And I worked on the IBM Watson team and did a lot of projects with them. And then I've been a serial entrepreneur ever since then. So this is my third venture-backed startup. My last company was Board Vitals, very fast growth medical education Inc. 500 company. And as I was developing that company, it became clear that AI was coming into radiology and pathology and ophthalmology as well. And there weren't a whole lot of companies that were doing AI in pathology, and just saw a great market opportunity. And it was inevitable that the algorithms come and help physicians that are making diagnostic decisions.
Awesome. So maybe tell us a little bit about PathologyWatch. Like what was kind of the impetus for starting it, and what I guess in a broad stroke sense, what do you guys offer to dermatology practices?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the hardest parts of starting any company in healthcare is how do you get reimbursed in a system that's on a very per claim basis for still most of medicine. And we looked at this market and said, how are we going to actually introduce the AI in a way that the market will truly adopt it? And the more that we looked at it, it didn't make a lot of sense to just develop the AI as a tool and then try to license it. It really needed to be a part of the laboratory, a part of the process, a part of the workflow of the physician. So at a basic level, what we do, we go out and talk to dermatologists, convince them to send samples to our laboratories instead of going to Quest or LabCorp or one of the major labs. And those samples, those biopsies come to our facility. We do the typical staining, and then we digitize the samples or the slides, and then we use a variety of algorithms to do the analysis. And then we have a physician do a final check, and then the results are pushed through to the dermatologist's electronic medical record system. So there are a few reasons why this system this process is so much better than what existed before. As you know, most in residency, like most pathologists are using digital pathology to learn and study, and then they get out into the real world, and the industry is mostly kind of microscopes and fax machines. And so our tagline is "Software eats pathology." We're replacing these very old systems with an entire end-to-end software process that takes out those fax machines, that takes out the microscopes. A few specific reasons why we're growing so fast. So we're in about 70 dermatology clinics, and we just started selling about 2 years ago. The first one is that there can be some potential financial upside for the dermatologist to view the case digitally, because even though we're providing the primary consult, if you look at the case on a secondary consult, there may be potential opportunities for like increased case complexity, for example. Secondarily, it's also just simply better patient care that you now have both the dermatologist and the dermatopathologist or the general pathologist looking at the case. The other reasons, on average, we see about 25 hours of labor reduction in the dermatologist's office, because instead of them having to deal with fax machines, we're integrated with like ModMed and EasyDerm and eClinicalWorks, all the major EMRs for our field. And it also going digital also enables like a whole new world of being able to like very easily send the case to expert consults anywhere, or have your primary dermatopathologist be really anywhere in the world. And so it's freeing up a lot of labor that otherwise would have had to be like right there in the lab. And I think all of those pieces together make this really transformational, and that's why we're getting so much adoption very quickly.
Interesting. Now, are most of those clinics, are they like private practice or kind of like community health systems, or is they more like academic centers? Like or is it kind of a mix of everything?
Yeah. So I would say mostly independent private practice dermatology clinics. We like to work with independent clinics because they're relatively fast decision makers. We can typically get an answer, within a month, and then they're sending volume almost immediately. We do have a couple of major like hospital partnerships. We work with Cedars-Sinai, Kingman Regional Medical Center. What's nice about them, they have insurance coverage, which is a big part of our business. We do have to go out and pick up the insurance contracts in order to do the billing for the pathology work. And so having key health system as partners is pretty critical.
Interesting. So I guess maybe, and you touched on this a little bit already, but maybe walk us through it. So like, I'm a dermatologist. I take a biopsy of, a patient, of a patient in my office, and I send it to you guys. Like, how does that, do you guys have people that come and pick these up on a regular basis, or do we like ship them into like a central lab? And then are all your things done at like is everything processed like at one location? Or I guess maybe kind of.
Those are really good questions. So we have 5 labs across the country, typically in more of the sunshine states where you see more skin cancer. And the reason why that we have multiple laboratories is that it's important to have really fast turnaround time. These are cancer diagnoses. We don't want to be shipping it all the way across the country. We pick up from the dermatologist. Sometimes it's a courier. Sometimes, depending on the location, if it's really remote, it might be like UPS or FedEx. And the skin tissue is put into little formalin bottles or jars. They're shipped in packages or picked up via the courier and run to one of our laboratories. Once it gets to the laboratory, we enter all of the patient information from usually that information is coming from the dermatologist electronic medical record system, so that we have a full record of the patient and the clinical visit. The biopsy's taken and cut into thin slices, stained, turned into a slide, and then those slides are loaded into really high throughput digital scanners that it's scanning about a slide every 30 to 40 seconds or so. And then that gives us it takes these images completely digital. Now, one of the innovations that we brought to the industry is that these are massive images. They can be 1 to 2 gigabytes per piece. Is figuring out how to break those images down into tens of thousands of small tiles, so that when a pathologist is looking at it, we're rendering exactly the tiles that are needed for the physician to view that case anywhere in the world. So we enable a web browser that pathologists can log in, view the case, make their diagnosis right there, within the browser. And that's really never happened before in pathology, as basic as that sounds, and that's very common in other industries, but it's the first time that you're seeing real usable digital interfaces in pathology. And then when they sign out the case, we take those results from the input from the web browser and submit the results back into the EMR. when the dermatologist goes into the EMR, they can see the report, and then if they want to view the image, it's just one click. It it automatically links from the report into our system. So a lot of times, the dermatologist is in the patient office, actually showing them what their tumor looks like, and what the treatment is going to be. And they're showing where the dermatopathologist actually highlighted a region or left a note, or anything like that. So it completely actually changes the patient experience in a way that hasn't really happened before, and that's super exciting. Also exciting to see like multiple experts being able to collaborate on the same case at the same time. Before this, if you wanted to look at it, you'd have to ship a glass slide like around the country. Just really inefficient. And this is a much better way of doing things.
We're going to take a quick break to let you know the DaVinci Hour podcast is brought to you by DaVinci Academy, which provides online video courses for the medical basic sciences. These courses are taught using a variety of teaching methods, including bullet point outlines, diagrams, radiology images, and chalk talks to explain the fundamental concepts. We then teach the application of those concepts to numerous clinical pearls that are frequently tested on medical school exams and the USMLE. Our video courses are available on our website, dviacademy.com, as monthly subscriptions starting at $9.99 per month. Each video course has a corresponding outline format textbook as well. You can find the link to our website in the description below. Also, be sure to use the discount code TDH20 to receive 20% off any of our video courses. All right, now back to the podcast.
Yeah, it sounds like you've really brought a significant amount of efficiency to what seems to be what previously was like somewhat of an outdated process. I guess I'm wondering, as you know, physicians and medicine at large is resistant to change and cannot always be the best about adopting new technology or new ways of doing things. What were some of the like hurdles or maybe some of the like skepticism you received at first, and how did you like convert those dermatologists that may have been skeptical at first to adopting your services?
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think those first, the first 2 or 3 clients were so much harder than the last 2 or 3 clients. Like at this point, it's very well validated. And I think everyone's much more comfortable using digital. And we don't get as much pushback anymore. But I think early on it was a question of, well, how do we know if digital is safe? How do we know that the scanner picked up all the tissue? And actually the scanners have really good controls in them. And we've fine-tuned the scanners over time to be really safe. We do use some redundant imaging to make sure that there's not a piece of tissue that's missing. And then also convincing the community that like algorithms can really help, like detecting blurry spots, or it's screening out things that happen inside the lab, that where the case really needs to go back and the slide needs to be redone. A very common problem in pathology. And I think that I think when people have adopted it, we have nearly 100% client retention. So I think once someone starts using it and they understand the efficiency gain, the better quality of care, the potential like the financial upside, I think a lot of those conditions are all aligned, and they say, okay, you know what, I'm willing to give this a shot. And they tend to not send all of their volume up front. Like they'll send a few samples, make sure they can see the digital, make sure that the quality of the reports are good and there are definitive diagnoses. And then they start sending more and more. And I think that's become a very common pattern. I think in general, pathologists sure are fairly resistant about being automated out of a job. I think that concern is in your field as well, in radiology.
Absolutely.
But we're just not finding that. Like this is not, this is technology that's designed to assist and help go faster. But like really excellent derm paths are not going to be replaced by AI in the next few years, realistically.
Gotcha.
And I think that's an important concept to understand is, also reimbursements are being cut. There needs to there does need to be ways to make pathology more efficient. And I think this is an answer. And the more forward-thinking pathologists like actually are really embracing this and getting involved. So and that's exciting to see that the communities kind of help moving things forward too.
Great. Maybe I was looking on your site, and it looks like you guys not only offer the service of processing the sample, digitizing it, but then you offer the diagnostic side. Like you actually have what looks like a full clinical dermatopathology team. Maybe tell me a little bit about how you've like recruited those pathologists, and are they essentially like telepathologists, or do you have them all in certain areas? And then have they given up their practice, or are they doing this as like another aspect of their career with you guys?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, and it's a really important part of what we do. Is not just we're not just a technology company. We do provide the diagnosis as part of what we do. We do have almost 5 full-time dermatopathologists that are working on our cases to support the client volume. It's structured as a contractor relationship, but most are doing like working entirely with our cases that are flowing through. And that really matters in the long run, because as as AI comes out and as AI develops, it's very important that to have basically pathologists that are forward thinking, that are willing to adopt the technology and also help us refine it. And so I think everyone on the team has become quite tech savvy. A lot are using digital pathology regularly. They are working remotely, which is amazing, because that means that now all of a sudden you can have an expert dermatopathologist, even if your case is coming from like very rural Nevada, for example, where we have a bunch of cases coming from kind of middle of nowhere, Arizona, California, Nevada. Well, someone is reading that remotely, and we wouldn't have gotten that expert otherwise without telepathology. So I think we're at that moment where pathology is shifting as well.
Excellent. Yeah. And, as you mentioned earlier, we've seen kind of a similar trend in radiology as well. There's radiologists now, similar to what you're describing with the pathologists, that go full-time telerads where they're completely, reading remotely. So that's really interesting that pathology is kind of moving that way as well. I guess it makes logical sense. It's in essence the same kind of skill set, interpreting images. So that's interesting. I guess what's some of like the positive feedback you've received from your clients? Like what have they told you, how this has like changed their practice, how this has improved things? Like what's the kind of a couple of the positive comments you've received?
Yeah, we actually have about 15 case studies, and for anyone that's interested, we do share these case studies pretty openly. Just our website's pathologywatch.com. But a few things. One is improvement in the turnaround time, because we've developed local laboratories in multiple locations. We're getting really good turnaround. The second thing is the savings on just the time in the dermatologist's office of dealing with faxes or auto faxes. We're eliminating a huge portion of that. We use all like kind of enhanced interfaces that deliver the results directly attached to the patient record. So it's a lot safer that way too. So you're not putting the wrong like patient record in the wrong chart. And then also the ability to like see the case, to see like what the lab is seeing, and that ability, it means that you can actually call up the pathologist and you can both be looking at the case at the same time, discuss that case. So it in some ways it's actually increased the amount of communication, which has a lot of benefit to the patient, and then just overall elimination of errors. I mean, our labs certainly have a much lower error rate than general labs, because it is software based, and we do have patient identification controls that are better than other locations. So it's kind of a whole slew of benefits. And then of course one of the major things is like that if a clinic wants a specific dermatopathologist, we can set them up with literally anyone in the world that can use a web browser. All of a sudden that becomes enabled, which is pretty cool to kind of free up pathology generally.
That's amazing. That's that kind of access is just really unprecedented till new technologies like yours. That's amazing. I guess one thing I wanted to ask you real quick was, a lot of our audience are, either attending physicians or resident physicians. What's your advice kind of as a technology CEO or health company CEO, that for physicians that would want to get involved with something like this? Like maybe they're practicing physicians, but they would want to, get involved in a company like yours where they can, contribute in a kind of a unique way in medicine, not just direct patient care, but kind of help new technologies like these really develop and foster.
Yeah, I think it's so much about finding the right team. I very much understand my limitations as a CEO. Like I'm very strong on the technology side and great on the business side, but I've never practiced medicine, right? And so I needed a partner. My partner, Dr. Greg Osmond, like a really great dermatopathologist and good person to work with. Bringing in that skill set was super important to balance out my own abilities and my own exposure. And he's going to bring a completely different perspective than I am, coming from my own field of expertise. It's very hard to have one person with 20 skill sets in their head. And so I think sometimes especially with physician entrepreneurs, it's super important to find someone that has actually had formal training in running a business, or that has run a business before, also that can develop out the technology and the infrastructure, and that knows like how to make right decisions. We see a lot of physician-run businesses that they're kind of solo founder, and those tend to fail. Whereas the ones that get venture backing, it's teams that have a lot more diverse skill set covered. And even in our company, we have 3 co-founders, and we barely cover the expertise needed to run this business. And so like most businesses cannot survive with just one founder, especially in medicine. You need real expertise in many fields.
Gotcha. Okay. I guess we had, talked about this earlier on, but maybe could you tell us a little bit more about some of the research and new developments your company's doing with AI and how that plays into, dermatopathology?
Yeah. So, a big driver for starting this company is being able to use AI eventually in the diagnostic process. It's a big endeavor. You typically, so we use an approach called supervised learning, which means that we're extracting small tumor nests digitally, and then training the AI on exactly what the tumors look like. And that's opposed to the other AI technique, which is called unsupervised learning, which is just kind of taking a million cases and throwing it at the AI and trying to let the AI figure out like what works and what doesn't. And specifically, why we picked supervised learning. It's a lot more expensive to build out, but the statistical accuracy is way higher when you train it that way, because you're teaching it very specifically what to look for. On average, it takes about between 25 and 30,000 tumor nests for to solve a particular AI line. And that's to get the sensitivity up into kind of the 99.5% accuracy. It's that size and level of data, and then it's also the diversity of data. You need to make sure that you're getting samples from multiple different laboratories, multiple scanners, multiple patient demographics. So that the AI has some level of generalizability, because otherwise you might be building an algorithm that's too narrow or too brittle. But the premise is super exciting, that it can, at those levels of accuracy, you're starting to pick up a lot of tumors that human physicians might miss. And there are a lot of studies that AI especially in like the areas like prostate. The AI is actually picking up tumors before humans can even see them, because there are these kind of like emerging patterns that the AI can recognize on a very, very small basis that would very easily be passed over. I also think the promise of AI is not just only in increasing clinical accuracy and speed and cost reduction. There's also a whole different world of there are some conditions like SCC, for example, that like very rarely they might become like very dangerous, and you might need to do genetic testing, or maybe there's a case where like a patient would be a really great candidate for a drug trial or a certain kind of treatment. And like those have not been possibilities when you're just relying on human review. But if you digitize the image, and you pick up these patterns that indicate like very personalized treatment, that's a big win for the company as well as for the patient. And some of these treatments are potentially expensive, but it also they can be fundamentally life-saving if you find out that a tumor actually will metastasize, or that hey, this patient really needs this drug. And so I think actually pathology is a key piece of the coming world of like highly personalized, highly algorithmic medicine, that makes things way better. And we're super excited about that here at PathologyWatch. Just rebuilding the entire pipe, knowing that we have a whole new set of tools that didn't even exist until 5-10 years ago.
Really interesting. That's I mean, AI is kind of the buzzword right now, but I think for the reasons you listed, it really has a lot of dramatic, I think, potential and improvements in how we deliver care, for sure. Both, as you mentioned, in my field in radiology, we've seen some of that already, and then definitely with pathology as well, it sounds like. So another question I thought of is, as far as the compensation, you touched on this a little bit earlier. How does your company make money in the short sense? Do you guys bill the practice directly? Do you bill the patient's insurance directly? Is it a combination of both? How does that exactly work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we bill just the standard right now. We just bill the standard for the technical component and the professional component. So we bill insurance for the work that's done inside of the laboratory. And that's very similar to how any major laboratory gets paid. What's different about us is that eventually we'll have AI that enables the pathologist to go faster, and so they'll be able to do more cases in a shorter amount of time, but then our reimbursements stay fixed. Eventually, it's estimated that there probably will be reimbursement codes for using AI and for using digital and all of that, but I think we're definitely ahead of the reimbursement curve and the legal curve on this. So to be determined on what those additional reimbursements look like for what we're trying to accomplish.
Gotcha. Okay. And then I guess, have you guys seen, is this something that you've seen some of the more larger companies like that you've mentioned try to venture into, or is this, or you've seen kind of some other startups popping up in this? I guess kind of what's your competitive landscape look like, if you will?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We're definitely seeing that the larger laboratories are just kind of starting to buy digital scanners right now. I don't think they've built viewers or integrated systems or anything like that. I think it's still very much early innings for the large players, but I think they do fundamentally understand like the value that digital can unlock, and so we're seeing kind of one-off investments. I would say the startup space is maturing. We've raised about $40 million so far, and we've definitely seen there are a couple of pathology companies that have raised north of 100 million. So there, in my mind, there are kind of 3 or 4 pathology companies that have a real shot at kind of transforming the landscape, or at least the funding is there for that. I think that we realistically start to see acquisitions in a 3 to 4 year time period. I think for a lot of groups, they're thinking of this as a buy much more rather than a build. I think it's easier to see the model once it's done and all that technology is ready to go. And bringing that into a much larger organization makes a lot more sense than trying to completely develop this in-house, especially in a large organization.
Gotcha. And I guess kind of to closing things out here, I want to just kind of get your general advice for, and I realize we could probably do a whole podcast on this, but what's your advice for physicians or even non-physicians like yourself that, they see a clinical need in healthcare, like you guys saw with PathologyWatch? Like, what are kind of those initial steps? Because as well as I do, good ideas are a dime a dozen, but how you actually execute on that and kind of the first I think a lot of people find a lot of trouble, at least in the initial first steps. Like, where do they go? Do they raise money? Do they not? Like, who do they talk to? Build a team? Those types of things.
Yeah, I think the first thing to always understand is that like venture capitalists and angel investors and everybody, like, the idea is really only 1% of the company. I mean, it is truly 99% execution, which makes sense. I mean, I think a lot of people think, oh yeah, there will be AI for pathology or there will be AI for radiology. Like that's like a fairly known concept. But the more important difference is, how are you going to get the insurance contracts? How are you going to win the footprint? How are you going to sell it? Who's going to pay for this? And I think the industry is very littered with companies that the idea was good, but they just didn't really find anyone that was willing to pay for it. And so starting with gathering customer information early on is so much better than just like building something and hoping that it sticks. And for us, we went out and before we built anything, we interviewed 15 dermatologists and said, what are your biggest pain points? Like, what would get you to switch? What would get you to send your volume? And then, and then we built it, and then we went back to those clients and got them to switch over. So, and also I would say, especially in healthcare, we see a lot of companies that are really successful by actually that they have a component that looks like a physician practice. There's you know that you're going to be reimbursed if you're actually like touching the piece of clinical medicine. And a lot of startups like try to avoid that completely because, they're trying to stay as like pure play SaaS or another kind of company. And if you want to really solve a problem, like you've got to be close enough to it that you're really actually, touching some of the services. I would also say find a mentor, someone that's actually like raised money for healthcare, or life sciences that has gotten to a certain point of exit or that has built a company before, because they're going to already have a network ready to go. They can introduce you to the right kinds of angel investors that invest in this kind of thing, or they can tell you like, hey, you really need to stay bootstrapped until you get to X, Y, or Z. Venture funding rounds are actually very formulaic. I've been on both sides of the table, so I know it's like, it's actually not as mysterious as you think. Like when you have certain defined milestones, whether that's number of patients or amount of revenue or a virality coefficient, or there are things that the venture investors are generally looking for that you need to meet. And if you know someone that knows like kind of what they're looking for, it really helps define like what the KPIs are for the business and like what the business needs to focus on. And so, if anyone needs help, like, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help, happy to help mentor, especially if you're trying to solve a critical problem in healthcare. I really respect that. And it's also great working with doctors and coming at their problems from a different angle. So, build a great team. And I think the rest kind of falls into place.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I guess kind of the closing thing is where can people go to learn more about PathologyWatch, and if there are dermatologists out there listening that want to inquire more about your services, what's the best way for them to reach out to you guys and get in contact?
Yeah, absolutely. So just visiting our website, www.pathologywatch.com, or send me an email directly, dan@pathologywatch.com. Or just asking, we're going to be at AAD and a number of dermatology conferences. We have a booth at most of those places. Just, stop by and ask questions and learn more about what we're doing. I think that we can genuinely help a lot of practices move way forward from the way that it works right now.
Awesome. Well, Dan, this has been really fascinating. This is, I think, like I told you, some technology that I heard a little bit about when I interviewed a dermatologist a few months ago, and then to actually, hear much more in depth about it now and how it's really changing dermatology practices and just the field of dermatology at large is really exciting. So thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to tell us about PathologyWatch.
Yeah. And thank you for having me. And I, hope to talk to many of you. Please reach out anytime.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the DaVinci Hour, brought to you by DaVinci Academy. More episodes are available on our website at dviacademy.com, our YouTube channel. They're also available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also on our website, you can find our video courses for anatomy, biochemistry, and histology, and they're available as month-to-month packages. They're also available as a combo package where you can get all 3 courses in one. Our website also has a store where you can find our outline format textbooks for anatomy, biochemistry, and histology. All textbooks are available in paperback version and as ebooks as well. These textbooks complement our video courses and provide a nice addition to the learning experience of allowing you to focus on the learning and not having to write anything down. On our website, we also provide a free clinical cases video series called DaVinci Cases. DaVinci Cases aims to help you learn how to answer USMLE questions and apply concepts that you learn in our courses to answering those questions. Our cases cover a variety of topics and organ systems, and they're updated frequently with new cases. And then lastly, on our website, you can find our blog, which has interesting articles that cover medical history, important figures in medicine, and innovations in medicine. Again, thank you for listening to this episode of the DaVinci Hour, brought to you by DaVinci Academy. Please be sure to tune in for our next episode.